Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 1st of August 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. It's a good month for burying bad news, Mike.
Is it?
Well, Parliament's disappeared and a few
All
things
kinds of stuff going on, yes.
A few things happening.
Well, we're going to start off with a lovely little cartoon from NATO. It may not look like it, well, they put their logo on it at last. Because apparently they're doing all kinds of wonderful things in North Africa and particularly in Libya. Their partnerships, the key to stability at home and abroad, especially their partnerships with the European Union and all these countries that they're operating in, like Tunisia and Iraq, training partners, neutralizing explosives, military medicine, border security. It's fantastic, all the stuff that they're getting up to. And of course, NATO is fighting terrorism. Well, how did they do that? Well, they fought terrorism, of course, by bombing Libya into the dark ages and creating a whole cache of arms and armaments, which were able to go over to Syria and other places. And of course, many of these people that went to use those arms and armaments in Syria, well, they are now on their way back to Europe. Well, Plymouth City Council has agreed now to house 35 refugee families from Syria. Now, I'm not saying that these refugee families are terrorists. I can't possibly know that. But the question is, who are these refugee families? Are they White Helmets refugee families? Are they Al Nusra Front refugee families? Because as far as I know, the vast majority of the refugees that had left Syria because of the war, many of them at least are heading back now that the war is, or at least there's peace in many parts of Syria. Their homes are now back in peaceful areas. And so they're heading back. But, MI5, only a few months ago, saying that Islamist attacks will threaten the UK for decades. And that's according to the former head of MI5 saying that ISIS is creating a terror cult. So what we have is NATO creating the circumstances where the terrorism was built up. Now the terrorism is being re-imported back into Europe and the United Kingdom. And the authorities getting the opportunity to say that we've got a fear for our lives because every time we look around, we're going to be faced with an ISIS terrorist. Well, the question then is, because Tommy Robinson, of course, as most people will be aware by now, has been freed. Freed is a bit strong. He's been let out on bail after winning the latest round in the courts. He has to appear at another hearing to decide whether he needs to go back into prison or not. But is he going to solve this problem for us? I'm afraid I don't think he is, because, of course, he's been promoting the idea that every home owned or occupied by a Muslim is a home belonging to an enemy combatant. And we've got to see every Muslim in the country as an enemy combatant. This is the narrative which is being presented by MI5, in fact, and it's a dangerous narrative. Now, in the meantime, NATO has caused this problem. Britain, France, and the US in particular as NATO member states. But Donald Trump was meeting with the new Italian Prime Minister this week. Well, as we'll see in a second, absolutely no coverage of this meeting in the UK press. But they had a joint press conference. This is with Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. I think it was yesterday or the day before, I'm not sure which. Well, they have announced a joint US-Italy steering committee to try to stabilize Libya. Now, of course, the United States, under a previous administration, largely responsible for the destabilization of Libya and the migration crisis that has happened as a result. But Trump seems to be attempting to do something to repair that. So he and Conte, well, he said that today Prime Minister Conte and I are pleased to announce a new strategic dialogue between Italy and the United States that will enhance cooperation in a range of issues. This includes joint security efforts in the Mediterranean, where we recognize Italy's leadership role in the stabilization of Libya and North Africa. So, as I say, this got absolutely no coverage in the British mainstream press. If we look at Google News there, not a British paper to be seen, with the exception of Russia Today. But of course, it's not British. So there you go. Why on earth would there be a problem with trying to bring stabilizing influences back into North Africa, which is one of the main routes for human trafficking and modern day slavery? Well, I'm sorry to put this, but I'm really not sorry to put this back on screen again, but we've just always got to keep in mind the scale of the profits that are being made out of the migration crisis at the moment. And I don't see too many people in the West looking at dealing with this problem in any rational way.
No, and the statistics themselves there, Mike, the financial statistics, 130 billion, tell you that somebody must have taken a very, very close look at the trade in order to calculate that sum of money. So this is not a mysterious, hidden, dark trade that we don't know about. If you can calculate its value, you must have a very good idea how it works, the numbers of people moving through the system and who's in control of it ultimately. So it's permitted because this is good money for people somewhere, presumably in positions of huge power and influence, international banking cartels, hedge funds. But the other point is that those Syrians brought into the country, absolutely no information made public, as you say, as to who they are. They have then followed the original policy, which has been used very successfully in immigration, which is dispersal. So rather than do something as a group in one area which could focus people's attention on what's happening, they're broken down into little groups and dispersed across the country. And then we can now see that central government policy is just executed by a local authority. Plymouth, as a local authority in its own right, doesn't stand up and ask questions about where these people are coming from and why it's necessary to take them in and look after them. They simply follow whatever the instructed government policy is. So a little bit later in the news, we're going to be coming onto this subject of the lie of the devolvement of power to local levels, because everywhere we go, we see that the state is actually taking more power. And the other bit I just wanted to add to this, in the destabilization of these countries, it's fascinating that in Afghanistan at the moment, apparently the Americans are having to crawl to the Taliban or former Taliban members to help them fight ISIS. So having created one immense problem in Afghanistan, then they're now trying to use people they were originally fighting to tackle the next problem, which is the so-called ISIS crisis.
And this policy of dispersal, of course, aids really anybody that wants to promote the narrative that every Muslim in the country is a danger, because they're distributed across the country, and so this becomes a problem for every community. And of course, what's the agenda? It's to make people fearful of each other. It's to produce polarization in groups. It's ultimately to produce violence, because if the government can get the violence on the streets, then they can enact those emergency powers that bring in the dictatorship. And make no mistake, the dictatorship in the United Kingdom is just under the surface. And we get a very good idea if we have a look at the so-called justice system. There is no justice system. The court system itself has collapsed. And this is now starting to come out into the open. A simple search will reveal headline after headline talking about breakdown in the so-called justice system. This might be to do with funding people who should be able to get legal aid and can't. It's to do with the public not being allowed into courts. It's to do with courts being shut. So there is article after article here telling us that there's no justice at the moment and the whole system is collapsing. I prefer to say is being collapsed. And this has just come out. This is Lady Hale, the President of the Supreme Court, and BuzzFeed News reporting her here. I'll come on to why that's significant. She said this: so what about today? What are the challenges facing the justice system, and how can empirical research help us to meet them and make things better? In fact, the challenges facing the justice system today are too numerous to mention, let alone address.
Now remember, of course, that she's using what I'll call positive newspeak. So when she talks about challenges, she's actually talking about major problems. There are major problems which are so numerous they can't address them. She's talking about breakdown of the system. And let's look at this, which is why it's so significant. The speech was made at the University College London Law Faculty on May the 14th, but was only published by the Supreme Court on Tuesday afternoon as Parliament prepared to close for the summer break. The day before recess is a traditional time to bury basically bad news. So this is the way that UK functions as a country now, keep the bad news away from the public. But BuzzFeed picked up on it, but this doesn't seem to be reported very widely elsewhere. News of the lecture comes as a committee of cross-party MPs has published a report saying that the cuts to the criminal justice system have been so extensive that they risk undermining the rule of law. Well, the reality is, of course, there is no law at the moment. And BuzzFeed says it's been highlighting the crisis, in particular the access to justice caused by cuts to legal aid and the rise of people being forced to fight their own cases with no lawyer. Well, of course, what BuzzFeed doesn't say is the latter is often happening because people have no trust in the lawyers and prefer to risk the fight by conducting their own cases in court. Well, here's the parliamentary angle. This is Bob Neill, chair of the Justice Committee. He had this to say: in criminal cases, there's a common law right to legal advice and a right to legal representation under the European Convention on Human Rights. There is compelling evidence of the fragility of the criminal bar and criminal defence solicitors' firms, which places these rights at risk, a risk which can no longer be ignored. And he went on to say an effective criminal justice system is one of the pillars on which the rule of law is built. Underfunding of the criminal justice system in England and Wales threatens its effectiveness, tarnishing the reputation of our justice system as a whole and undermining the rule of law. These reviews should be carried out with urgency to end the crisis we're currently facing. But of course, what he doesn't understand or doesn't want to tell the public is that the funding cuts have been engineered to create the crisis in the first place. And of course, we had Tory MPs a couple of years ago admitting publicly that the Tories plan to introduce what they called creative destruction of public services. Why do you need that creative destruction? Well, you need the turbulence to bring in the change agenda for the new state. So Bob Neill, typical politician, he's either totally ignorant as to what's happening in the country or he is part of the deception on the British public. Either way, there's no justice. And we can report that on the back of that, Melanie Shaw is still in remand in HM prison style. The prison is blocking her communications, that's letters and phone calls. We can now also say live that the prison, and the responsibility must rest with the prison governor, are blocking legal visits as well as other visitors that might want to come in to see Melanie. So it would appear at the moment that HMP style is beyond the law, Mike, and Melanie Shaw clearly to be silenced. And why do they want Melanie Shaw silenced? Because this is one of the key witnesses that the independent child abuse inquiry will not speak to, because Melanie is one of the high-level whistleblowers who has been talking about connections with British politicians and child abuse. So on the right of screen there is an image of the prison governor, Mihaela McGuffey. Presumably this woman is now above the law, such as remains in UK at the moment. So we're talking about utter breakdown in UK, Mike, and it's apparent that with the MPs away on their summer holidays now, we can expect the cabal that's really in control of this country to be able to press some fairly big buttons, I think.
Well, you're talking about part of the problem here is the transformation of the justice system, and of course, with courts being closed, lack of public access, and a move towards artificial intelligence and other electronic methods to provide so-called justice. So we've got a transformation process going on within the justice system. Equally, we've got a transformation process going on within the police. So the government has announced today that it's investing more than £100 million this year in the Police Transformation Fund in projects designed to prepare police forces to adapt to the challenges of the future. Sajid Javid has approved £70 million for investment in 2018-19 in 4 national police-led programmes covering forces in England and Wales, and to manage the portfolio of projects to ensure maximum benefits are shared among forces. So what are they talking about? The National Enabling Programme, this is going to deliver a unified IT system across policing and deliver more joined-up working within and between forces. In Cumbria, for example, cloud-based note-taking technology offers officers preparing to question suspects in custody, a view of real-time information from victim interviews being conducted by other officers elsewhere, which apparently improves responses offered to those affected by crime. Then they're putting money into the Specialist Capabilities Programme, which is going to improve force-to-force resource sharing in key crime areas like roads policing and armed policing, and in cybercrime. They're looking at the digital policing portfolio, which aims to improve police's use of technology, including by creating a single online hub. This single online hub allows members of the public to report low-level incidents online rather than having an officer manually record the information. And finally, transforming forensics. Biometric services, digital forensics are used, and so on. Now, if you look through each of those points, what we're looking at it really is they're saying that the programs will transform how police use technology, making it easier for the public to engage with police online and boost capacity to deal with major threats. But what's actually going on is they're preparing to merge British police forces into one police force, or English in Wales, just as they have done in Scotland. So they're talking about unified IT systems. They're talking about a single hub for the public to record simple crimes. So that means that once police services start to be merged, the public won't actually notice the difference because they'll be used to using a single hub. But as I went and looked at some of the specific projects that they were putting money into, things like a regional organised crime threat assessment, again, merging teams together, National Firearms Threat Centre, national infrastructure, cloud infrastructure for policing, we've talked about that, commercial collaboration, supporting vulnerable victims in court. There's very little money for that one, actually. But then things like multi-agency stalking interventions, and also organised crime group. And then with things like Galvanise. Galvanise is, Gloucestershire Police is heading that one up. It aims to create a locally deployed, nationally networked proof of concept to develop, defend and deter cyber and internet facilitated crime. Good stuff. But then the last one here, Merseyside Police, taking point on this one, open source investigation and evidential capture is a program that they're working on now. We've seen how open source investigations have worked in Syria with regard to chemical weapons investigations. I don't get a terribly pleasant feeling from the idea of British police relying on open source investigations in order to save money.
I don't get a good feeling at all. And of course, if we take a very simple thing, corruption inside the police, is there corruption inside Britain's police? There certainly is. If you amalgamate it into one force, who is there to investigate? This was the problem north of the border in Scotland, that when Police Scotland formed as one unit, there was no independent or other force to investigate corruption in the police. So effectively, the fraud and corruption is then locked in to the police system, where the public can't attack it, even if it knows that that fraud and corruption is there. Where's all the policy coming from for this sort of transformation agenda? There is no doubt that it's coming out of organisations such as the Behavioural Insights Team. Now, the UK column has nearly been alone in warning and warning about the dangers of this team. And of course, originally spawned inside the Cabinet Office, it was then pushed out towards the private sector, where it's growing and its pernicious influence is also growing. So if you haven't come across it before, I encourage you to get onto their website. This is the sort of picture you see. These unelected, supposedly super intelligent leaders discussing what policies they are going to bring in. And let's have a look at what they say about themselves. Well, basically, they are saying that they're now a social purpose company, jointly owned by the government. So are you dealing with the government, or are you dealing with a company you don't know? But then there's also Nesta, the innovation charity, and this is straight into participatory democracy, which is where we now are. It's not to do with the individual voting, it's to do with the charities and NGOs and what their opinion on policy is. They say they started life in 10 Downing Street as the world's first government institution dedicated to the application of behavioural sciences, and then they make claims that they're going to make our life, make public services more cost effective and easier for us to use, improving outcomes by introducing a more realistic model of human behaviour to policy, enabling people to make better choices for themselves. So we don't really know how to conduct our lives, but those mysterious people outside 10 Downing Street know how to do it, and they're going to help us do it by using applied behavioural psychology. Still no risk assessment done on this by the government, so we don't know what psychology they're using. We've got an idea that it includes neuro-linguistic programming, but the dangers of it, the government simply ignoring. Now, why do we need to pay attention to these people? Well, have a look at this gentleman. This is Dan Goldstein. Dan is best known for his work on choice architecture as it relates to retirement saving and organ donation. That sounds to me like a pretty unpleasant mix, but it gets worse. He's currently principal researcher at Microsoft Research, where he works the intersection of behavioural economics and computer science. So we can now show that without any consultation of the British public, Microsoft is now sitting helping create policy for the British government. Now, if you've not come across this before, this is something for you to do, is to get writing, get onto those emails and start pinning down your MP and get them to explain why Microsoft is now directly helping produce government policy. But it gets worse, of course. We've got this man, Richard Thaler. He was the original author of Nudge, where it suggested that if governments became super savvy, they could use applied behavioural psychology to change the way people thought and behaved. Make us better at paying taxes was one of the things they crowed about. We've got another heavily, specialised psychology man, Nick Chater here. What I noticed about him is that he's very big on climate change. So he's a member of the Committee for Climate Change. So he is silly enough to believe in the climate change scam, but we can be sure that his psychology is going to be used to change the way we think. We've got Peter John here. And if you read what he's up to, he's using experiments on the public. We don't know whether we as the public are being told about this, but he's currently using experiments to study civic participation in public policy with the aim of finding out what governments and other public agencies can do to, quote, encourage citizens to carry out acts of collective benefit. Well, of course, the acts of collective benefit are only really acts that the government considers to be of benefit. So
collective to the government, not collective to the public.
Absolutely. This is government policy. Very, very, in my opinion, dangerous people using applied behavioural psychology, and most of the public completely unaware of it. We've got this guy, Peter Tufano. Well, what's special about him? Well, Dean Oxford Said Business School. Remember the Said Business School, funded by money which many people say effectively came from former or linked arms dealers, if I remember the saga properly. But he's big in household finances, but he's also connected through to an organisation called Commonwealth, buildcommonwealth.org, a US-based non-profit that collaborates with consumers, the financial services industry and policymakers. So this is absolute big money, big business sitting alongside the Cabinet Office, forming policy without any backbencher in Westminster having a clue what's going on here. And this lady I found particularly creepy, Theresa Marceau. What she got to say for herself? Well, she's a director of the Behaviour and Health Research Unit at the University of Cambridge, Department of Public Health and Primary Care, and fellow and director of studies in psychological and behavioural science at Christ College, Cambridge. And her research focuses, amongst other things, on, let me just call it up here, particularly interventions targeting non-conscious processes. I don't get a warm feeling. I don't know what this lady's morality is. I don't know her honesty levels, don't know anything about her, but she's now sitting alongside the government forming policy. This one was interesting, Mike. It's our old friend Gus O'Donnell.
That's God himself.
Yes, who was known as God because of the power he had inside the Cabinet Office and the government when he was there running the civil service. But remarkably, this section is blank for him. That's not a mistake by the UK column. When you go on their website, it's utterly blank. So if we put some of this together, the Behavioural Insights team now says, well, we work alongside the Cabinet Office, so not directly accountable, it would appear, to the Cabinet Office, but they're pushing the policy. They're also working with this charity Nesta. We've talked about them before. We'll be talking about them in the future. Immensely powerful and helping the British government form policy, whether the public wants it or not.
And of course, Nesta money going into the NGOs and charities that they want to promote or that are doing the work that fits in with their ideology and agenda.
That's the key expression. These people are big on ideology. It's not our ideology, it's their ideology. But remember now that the Behavioural Insights team has been pushed out of government. It's now working through Behavioural Insights Limited. And I couldn't do enough before the news today, but who are these people? This is a key question. Who are these people? And what do we know about them? Nothing. Who voted for them? We've no idea.
Well, let's go straight on to RBS then, because, the Financial Conduct Authority has pulled a blinder today by deciding that RBS really hasn't broken any rules when they asset stripped all those small and medium-sized enterprises. Just to remind everybody, this is RBS's Global Restructuring Group, and what they had been doing was to make as a condition of a loan to a small or medium-sized business up until 2007, 2008, they were making as a condition of the loan that the business would take out a derivatives contract. Effectively, they were selling it in the terms of an insurance policy, but in fact it was a derivatives contract, something that most small business owners wouldn't have a clue what the risks involved in it were, but they were forcing these things on these businesses by saying, well, if you don't take this insurance policy, in inverted commas, you can't have the loan. So lots of companies took the loans, and of course with the financial crash, these derivatives contracts effectively went the wrong way for the small business owners, and they ended up having huge repayments to make on them, which of course they couldn't make. And so instead of RBS sticking up its hands and saying, okay guys, we made a bit of a mistake here, we've missold these agreements to you, and we'll help you through this difficult time. No, they started to asset strip these companies. But unfortunately, the Financial Conduct Authority has decided that it's not going to take action against Royal Bank of Scotland staff, despite what they described as disastrous practices. They said none of its rules were broken, and so there's nothing that can be done. It said that there's no evidence that the bank deliberately destroyed companies so it could seize their assets. One of the really horrendous internal memos that came to light was from a GRG employee who said sometimes you just need to let customers hang themselves. This was kind of the attitude of these people. We're going to asset strip these companies, and if a business owner here or there hangs themselves as a result, well, you know, we just got to let it happen. There's not really much else we can do. That is the City of London at work. We can't really say any more than that, can we? If anybody's interested, Colm Canning, who worked for Ulster Bank, which was part of RBS at the time, he resigned as a result of these practices and then tried to blow the whistle on it, was attacked in turn quite seriously. We interviewed him a couple of years ago, and that interview is available on the UK Column YouTube channel if you want to go and look for it on the website, I believe, as well.
Can we also say that if you want more information on the fraud in the banks, have a look for a gentleman called Anthony Stansfeld, who is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Thames Valley. Unique gentleman who is standing up now to ask what is being done, particularly by the police, to investigate these extremely high-level frauds. So take an immense courage by Anthony to do that. If members of the public have a look at what he's doing and care to send him messages of support, that would be very, very powerful.
Okay, another day, another apology from Jeremy Corbyn, and really Jeremy Corbyn needs to, as I say, grow a pair, because he is being, this issue of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party is, it looks like an organised campaign to me, and he is not getting to grips with it at all. The latest one now is that he apparently spoke at a Holocaust Memorial Day meeting in 2010, and at the event, Hajo Meir, who was a survivor of Auschwitz, delivered a speech in which he compared, the speech was called "The Misuse of the Holocaust for Political Purposes," and he compared the activities of modern-day Israel with regard to the Palestinians with what the Nazis did in the 1940s. As I say, the title of the talk was "The Misuse of the Holocaust for Political Purposes." I think I have to say I agree completely that that is what is being done. And of course, because of the furore at the moment over the Labour Party's definition of anti-Semitism and the fact that they are not prepared to put in the examples that they give for what constitutes anti-Semitism, they're not prepared to include criticism of the activities of Israel. Of course, the Labour Party under massive attack from the Jewish community in the UK, including Jewish members of the Labour Party, and Corbyn not standing up to this. Nobody should be under any illusions about what Jeremy Corbyn is, but the fact of the matter is that one of the things that he has been traditionally is a supporter of the Palestinian cause, and he has criticised Israel for its activities for many, many years. All of a sudden, he seems to be caving in. Now, I said it's an organised campaign because that's how it seems to be. The Blairite faction seems to be well and truly behind this, but also people that have been perceived as being close to Corbyn. So this guy Peter Wilsman, who has been making comments which have been viewed as anti-Semitic. A new recording has turned up of him claiming that Jeremy Corbyn had asked him for advice on anti-Semitism in the past. Tom Watson, who's of course the deputy leader of the Labour Party, saying that Peter Wilsman disgusts him, and so this is all being used to drive this thing into something much bigger than it is. But at the end of the day, Brian, I don't think it's an anti-Semitic thing to criticize Israel for what it's doing. It seems to me that Israel and supporters of Israel are determined to make it an anti-Semitic thing.
This is a very crude defence that if you dare to criticise anything that the Israeli government is doing, then you can be branded anti-Semitic. But we're seeing the same sort of thing come into the government of UK. If you dare to criticise the government, then you are effectively a domestic terrorist. So there's the same angle, both sides of the line. But of course, many people inside Israel are now criticising their own government. So it's pretty ridiculous to try and play the anti-Semitic card, I think.
Well, let's look at what else Israel has been up to, because the Syrian military today saying that they have discovered caches of Israeli-made bombs in Daraa province. Obviously, this is now liberated from ISIS and other Islamic terrorists. So they are completing the defeat of the terrorists holed up in Daraa and other provinces in Syria, according to this article, and they're focusing on clearing up after the people that have left. They found weapons caches belonging to foreign-sponsored jihadist terrorists, and according to Sana News, they have been conducting cleanup operations in the towns of Babila and Yalda, and they found a number of anti-personnel mines, rocket-propelled grenade launchers, rockets, machine guns, automatic rifles, chemical substances used to make bombs, as well as telecommunications devices, and many of them with Israeli markings on them. So the question is, since many of these people were foreign fighters, were they sponsored by Israel in some way? Is that why they have Israeli weapons, or did they steal these weapons from somewhere?
They were given them, without question, and the same for the weapons that have come in from the UK and the USA and other Western powers, deliberately put into the area.
Absolutely. Now, let's move on to what's going on with Facebook. And apparently they have identified a new ongoing political influence campaign. This is originally coming from the New York Times, apparently. But they're saying that it's coordinated misinformation efforts ahead of the US midterm elections. And so they've taken down 32 pages and accounts which, quotes, resemble Russian activities on the platform during the 2016 presidential campaign. So if you have a page or an account on Facebook and the types of posts that you're putting on resemble activities that were taking place in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election, then you're likely to be considered a Russian activity, a Russian bot of some kind, and have your page shut down. Facebook pulls fake accounts that mimic Russian tactics ahead of the election was the Wall Street Journal version of this article, and it says, "We do not have enough technical evidence to state definitively who's behind this. Several lawmakers pointed the finger at Russia." So again, they're acting without any evidence, if you listen to the Sunday Wire at the weekend, Patrick Henningsen had a guy on from Brazil. And this is one of the largest opposition campaigns on the right wing of politics, but they're having their pages shut down left, right, and centre. So this is a global campaign by Facebook.
Global campaign. Let's just remind ourselves of your report yesterday, Mike, on Andy Pryce. This is the mysterious man who's head of counter disinformation and now media development. Still no news on freedom of information on this man and his activity.
No, still no response from the Foreign Commonwealth Office. They are now about a week overdue on an internal review on the original reasons for declining to answer the question in the first place. Okay,
so there we are. A lot of secrecy from the UK government over this man. Perhaps we could ask very nicely for anybody who was maybe close to his activities, who might like to tell us a bit more about what he's up to. We'd be very grateful, and we do from time to time get some very interesting information from inside the government, so let's see what happens. But whilst he's doing what he's doing, we're making a big fuss because apparently Putin has created what's being described by the West, at least, as a new political wing inside the Russian army dedicated to promoting patriotism amongst soldiers in a chilling echo of the Soviet era. Well, it's very interesting, isn't it, that as we can see the West not only having built but deploying this massive propaganda arm, it makes total sense that the Russians are going to counter this by making sure that particularly their military knows what is real news and what is fake news from the West. And of course, the Russians have been on the ball with this for many years now, because of course it was only a little while ago that Russia was throwing out the British Council, got them to shut their offices in every other location apart from Moscow, I think, because they realised that this, I'm going to use that word pernicious again, this pernicious British NGO, was in fact causing trouble inside Russia, stirring up trouble inside Russian society, and the Russians said, well, we're not going to have that anymore. And let's remind ourselves also from your report yesterday that of course here's the UK using graphic videos. It's not in a war of words, this is propaganda coming out of the UK in order to try and unseat Putin, who is not following the global rules-based agenda. Why have I got onto this subject? Because we in the West need to be very careful at how the propaganda is also targeting us. This article was sent to me by several people. I always find that interesting that people who don't know each other pick up on some of this stuff. So it's campus reform with an article, course disputes the idea that heterosexual sex is natural. It goes on, Eugene Lang College is offering a queer ecologies course this fall devoted to countering heterosexist explanations of animals and nature. According to the instructor, common scientific practices like using the terms male and female when describing reproduction amongst plants and animals contributes to the perception that queerness is unnatural. You've got that, Mike, have you? There was a little expression on your face there. Let's bring in a bit more, because it's apparently drawing from traditions as diverse as evolutionary biology, LGBT plus movements, feminist science studies, and environmental justice. This course will examine the ways in which sex and nature are understood. Now, this is not a joke. This is a real course. Money has been put up to run it, and many people would say this is nonsense. But no, this is the start of what we can expect to see here in UK, because the policy that comes in America somehow finds its way across the Atlantic. So if you have a look at campus reform, you'll find that it's a project of the Leadership Institute, which is America's leading site for college news. So now we're getting a little bit deeper. It's not just an article. Where's it come from? Well, it's come in from the Leadership Institute, and this was something created by Mr. Morton C. Blackwell. And if I can bring him on screen here, what are they doing? Well, they're getting into the minds of young people in colleges on a vast scale, boasting of interacting, I think, with about 190,000 college or 200,000 it is, 200,000 students. And they're boasting that since 1979, they've been able to employ over 251 million into this work. So this is not small-scale stuff. This is doctrine, this is policy, which comes from somewhere. Follow the money. We're getting fairly close to the sorts of people that are actually pushing it. And they're boasting they've now got revenue of $15 million a year, $15 million a year, and a full-time staff of 72. And let's give you a little bit more about what they say. They were founded in '79 by President Morton C. Blackwell, provides training in campaigns, fundraising, grassroots organising, youth politics and communication. The Institute teaches conservatives of all ages how to succeed in politics, government and the media. So this is political, Mike. This is a political organisation with millions of dollars being able to bring in huge influence as to what youngsters are taught in colleges. And it's saying here, conservatives learn how to form independent conservative student groups. Isn't that an oxymoron? Independent conservatives. Well, okay. Manage grassroots orientated campaigns, publish independent conservative school newspapers, succeed in the competitive field of broadcasting media, run successfully for elected office, communicate a conservative message. So this is political campaigning, crudely disguised as some sort of independent benefit for campuses.
Good stuff.
I'll leave people to think about that. Well, that brings us to the end of the news today. I'll just say that on Saturday, I will be joining David Scott in Orkney for another one of the Fresh Start talks. where we'll be talking about abuse of children and the failure of governments to deal with that abuse. So if you're in north of Scotland or you fancy a weekend break to Orkney, perhaps you might like to join us there. And also a very big thank you for UK column viewers and supporters from overseas. We know that there's a great number of people, particularly in the United States, now tuning in and watching us. So if you're listening to us with a slight time delay, probably, we're going to say thank you very much for watching UK column and supporting us. And also a big thank you to those people who have taken out subscriptions. Stumbling there a bit. If you haven't already taken out a subscription and you're enjoying watching UK column for free, please consider supporting, because we can only do what we do with your financial support. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.